if you look at how we're structured now, and this is where I think we are really having trouble, is our institutions seem incapable of change. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. And we've got to work within institutions. We have to organize collectively, right? And so it's how to get them to change. But it's the federal-provincial gridlock. You bump up against it time and time again. And the B&A Act, when it was structured in 1867, the issues of the day were so different now than the issues of the 21st century. And so we've got the old sort of fiefdoms. You've got a Department of Agriculture, Department of Fisheries and Oceans.
Agriculture is destroying the fisheries and oceans.
And overlapping mandates. And
Natural Resources Canada is funding the oil wells that Environment Canada is opposing.
Exactly. So the structure of, and I can talk best to the federal government because that was my former life and world, they're organized around problems that don't exist anymore rather than issues. What are the issues that are facing us? The issues are globalization, sustainable development, inequalities. Should we have a family allowance that encourages people to have children? Or are there more effective ways when you've got to alleviate child poverty? But with these old sort of structures, and that's the question I think we've got to start asking ourselves. So I think we've got to work at multiple levels. I think there has to be people working for change inside and outside. But I think we have to recognize that the people sometimes working for change inside institutions have one of the hardest jobs in some ways because it is so incremental.
The heyday of the 70s or 60s, the revolution against the status quo that was for a long time until then, with the anti-globalization movement, which has, I guess, dissipated to some degree, and I think may experience another, may come alive again in the next little while. So.
Let me just start with this idea and get me back on track if I get off track too fast. Is this idea that social movements, we tend to, when we're younger, think of them as episodic, like we've created this and it doesn't have any prior history, whatever. I'm beginning to see this sort of long wave of social change and social learning. So in some ways, perhaps you could link anti-globalization back to the anti-nuclear movement, back to another social movement, and that we're learning, and that somehow or other this social learning goes from one generation to another. So that's sort of some of my recent thinking on how these things happen. You're going to have to intervene because I don't know about the anti-globalization. I know from the periphery, not having been involved in it. It seems to me that there is a loss of faith in the ability of government and institutions to change.
Didn't that exist in the 70s as well?
No, we believed, like the heyday of the 60s, because that was the antecedent to the 70s, was that the individual could make a difference. Like I went into government as a young person to change government. I firmly believed I could change government. The power of the individual to change the system. That's what we all sort of believed. And I guess because we had achieved so much in trying to change, I come from a generation where you couldn't wear jeans or pants to school, and you couldn't wear your hair above, below your ears. You were kicked out if you did that.
Fairly significant.
And you didn't have access to birth control. We fought for sort of very, very large, what would appear to be small steps now. So I do believe there's a loss of faith in the institution and in leaders to be able to change or to do anything. On the other hand, there's a much greater sophisticated analysis of what the issues are on the part of young people.
So we've learned from the basis that the 70s provided
or
in some way.
Or maybe, I haven't thought of this, maybe we failed. Maybe we didn't reform the institutions as much as we... Was I effective in changing, or any of my peer group in changing the basic structure of government? No.
But was that your aim?
Yes, yeah. But did we implement meaningful programs? Yes. I think we did some really, really important stuff, and we influenced maybe at a far smaller scale than we thought we would. But then we didn't face like globalized, interconnected, interdependent issues that you're now facing, your generation.
The scale.
The scale and the magnitude and the interconnected of the vested interests is much, much greater. And I don't know, though. Is it my analysis right that you just don't feel you're going to be able to change government and change institutions?
It definitely seems like a fairly formidable challenge to try and influence or transform government. It has so much momentum. I mean, I'm sure it's possible to change, but only at the margins. Like, how could you create a non-hierarchical, self-organizing system out of something that is exactly the opposite and has so much embedded infrastructure and everything else into doing something in a particular way?
Yeah. I tried to write a book on that, right? Exactly that, because what I'm arguing for is you should elect your government, and then your government is elected on what we call domains of appreciation, which is essentially issues. So if you elect a government that's committed to climate change, if you elect a government that's committed to social justice and alleviating child poverty, then those become the issues of the day. And governments should then sort of matrix manage around that, the federal government.
But how would bureaucrats cope with that?
Well, that's how well do any of us cope with change and the rapidity of change, right? People want security. They crave structures. But on the other hand, there's such creativity and innovation that's released, right, from these being able to self-organize around what are the issues. Plus, it reduces the vested interests, right?
So this is interesting. Do you think we could create some sort of platform where a government is arranged like that Science One program at UBC? So
now explain that a bit more to me, Yul. I'm not understanding what the Science One program you're referring to.
Well, the Science One program at UBC it's an issues-based curriculum. So they go through, for example, what would be an example? I guess wind energy. If they looked at wind energy, they would bring together 4 scientists into the room, and perhaps even some from the social sciences, and look at it from the physics perspective, from the economics perspective, from the engineering perspective, and analyze it in a systematic way, rather than in going to a physics class and studying wind energy, then going to an economics class and studying wind energy.
Studying separate silos, stovepipes, and solid
exactly. Yeah. So you bring together. It's around the whole issue, and you bring together very diverse perspectives and come up with completely different ways of integrating or addressing the need for wind energy in society.
Yeah, and that gets to this idea that the problems are so complex, the issues are so great, that no one can be an expert, especially in our field of sustainability, right? It's like saying you're an expert in the world. So therefore you have to bring interdisciplinary teams of people together to take a look at it. And there's nothing wrong with that. And then I think that the creativity and the solutions are an emergent property of those teams, that no one sector, no one group of experts can come up with those solutions.
So wouldn't you say that government is the antithesis to that?
Well, or that...
To a large degree?
The way government's currently structured is the antithesis to that.
Yeah,
so that's why I also think... But government is so critical because it could play the role, and should play the role, of the honest convener of the stakeholders, right? It is really, truly one of the more supposedly neutral places to convene. It's an honest broker. It can play that. And
but can there ever be an honest broker?
Well, I would back up. You see, my generation says there should be an honest broker, and we're going to make it be an honest broker somehow. And how, I don't know. But it depends where your passion and your focus lies. So if one accepts the role for government or if one accepts the role that we need in society, an honest convener and an honest broker, then what you've got to do is to try to keep working for changing that.